Hey guys, tonight we drift to the hush between two storms, where lightning has already argued with the sky, and thunder mutters about losing the debate. You stand at the edge of a windless ridge, breath white in the dark, and every pebble under your boot sounds like a bell in a sleeping church. Somewhere above, Olympus wears a ring of cloud like a crown, tilted after a long party. You listen, and in that listening, something old stirs. A name that moves like a shadow underwater. Kratos. Tiny reality check. If you were actually up, here at night, following strange whispers into mountain fog, you probably won't survive this, especially without a jacket and, basic common sense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing our sleepy map of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You listen harder, the wind quiets, and the quiet gains weight, like a blanket thrown over a ringing bell. You realize this isn't nothingness. It's a presence that prefers not to shout. The story says the world needs a counterweight, the way a scale needs a second pan, or a boat needs ballast. The gods are noise, glorious, sparkling, dramatic noise. So something is born to balance them. He doesn't arrive with a crash. He condenses, the way dew appears on grass. Kratos, the Titan made from the breath between thunderclaps, from the pause in a choir when every throat holds the same soft hope. You crouch, touch the ground. The rock is old, older than the marble. Blocks the Athenians will someday stack into the Parthenon, older than every amphora, stamped with a potter's thumbprint. A steady bass note hums through your fingertips. Kratos is patience given shape. When gods bicker, he listens. When mortals panic, he slows their pulses the way a calm hand slows a skittish horse. His purpose is not to stifle joy or dim the fire of life. His purpose is to keep the fire from burning the house down. Think of him as that friend who turns down the TV 2 clicks, and suddenly everyone stops yelling about the remote. You move through scrub pines and blackthorn, and the air smells like resin and damp stone. Above you, Mount Olympus lifts into the dark, about 2,918 meters at its highest peak. A real mountain with real storms that can slap hikers around like they're crumbs on a tablecloth. That's your mainstream fact for the evening, tucked in like an olive in a salad. Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks actually made formal pilgrimages high onto the mountain itself, or kept most rites in the cities and at lower sanctuaries, letting Olympus loom as a stage set for the imagination. Either way, it was the address of the divine in people's minds, and addresses matter. A nightbird clicks from a laurel. You think of voices, of how stories move. In old theaters, stagehands rattled bronze thunder jars to fake Zeus's storms, a kind of vintage special effect. It's comforting, somehow, that humans have always loved a bit of budget thunder. Kratos, by contrast, is the sound tech who mutes the channel before the feedback becomes pain. He exists because the world learned early that power without hush becomes static. He is the hush that heals. A shimmer coalesces at the corner of your sight, not light, softness, the outline of a man big enough to be called Titan, but gentle enough to speak with his hands open. He is not carved in the hard, heroic style. He looks like a harbor breakwater, plain, necessary, the unsung reason the boats don't smash. You hear me? He says, though his mouth barely moves. You nod and realize you're answering something in yourself too. Maybe you've already met him. In the moment before you said the thing you couldn't unsay, in the breath you took instead, he shows you beginnings, not a cradle, not a mother's arm, beginnings in the architecture of the world. The fates sit at their loom, and when the threads of gods start to snarl like earbuds in a pocket, Kratos appears as the patience that untangles without snapping a single strand. He tells you he isn't born once. He's born whenever balance is needed, like dew, as many times as the morning asks. Yes, he's basically the universe's refill water bottle sign, but in a majestic, mythic way. You walk with him along a ridge path scratched by goat hooves. He points downslope where fires wink in a village. A child refuses sleep. A mother hums. Somewhere an old man rubs olive oil on aching knees and mutters about the price of figs. Kratos says he was first felt in small rooms, not palaces. Noise collects at the top, he murmurs. But so does arrogance. Balance must start where people breathe. You wonder if the gods ever noticed this whisper walking through their world, the way a breeze strolls through a crowded market, flipping one corner of a stall's cloth and making the apples look briefly brighter. From the side of the ridge, a raw track climbs higher, steep and rocky enough to make your calves complain. The Titan watches you, amused the way a mountain is amused, kindly, slowly. Why do you exist, you ask, finally giving the shape to the question your chest has been keeping warm. Because they overspeak, he says simply. Because applause can deafen its own performers. I exist to help the song be heard. It isn't anger in his voice. Not yet. It's duty polished by years of being ignored. Like a coin thumbed smooth, you picture Olympus as a banquet that never ends. Golden cups, clever jokes, divine family drama that makes holiday dinners look tame. Somewhere in that laugh track, a quieter one clinks, the cup of Kratos, filled with plain water, no ambrosia fizz, no lightning garnish. If a god drinks it, the god hears mortals again. If a mortal drinks it, the mortal hears themselves. Hard sell at a party, but essential. Joke 1. Imagine pitching still water to Dionysus. Good luck with that. A cloud shivers across the moon. The Titan points to it, then draws a small circle on the ground with his fingertip. Every storm has an eye, he says, and every crowd has a silence. I stand there. You remember a quirky scrap you once read. Some ancient healers mixed crushed herbs with odd ingredients for cosmetics. People have tried stranger things than silence to keep themselves safe and shining. We'll save the stranger details for later, because you deserve to sleep without thinking about old-timey beauty hacks involving, very committed sourcing. Your throat tastes like cold iron. If you are balanced, you ask, what happens when the scale is tipped on purpose? He looks toward the summit. Then I learn to be weight, he answers. Not louder, heavier, The idea sits in your bones like a stone. This, you understand, is the seed of a different story, the one that will grow into carefully chosen revenge. Not the splashy kind with fireworks, but the kind that retunes a world. Joke 2. Imagine Zeus trying to clap on beat to that. You and Kratos stand until the cold nips your ears. He says he will show you where quiet ends and purpose begins, the exact seam where listening becomes decision. He touches your shoulder, and you feel steadier, like your spine just remembered it's a mast and not a wet rope. In that steadiness, the path appears clearer, down through old pines, across a dry stream bed that will be roaring by spring, and up toward a saddle where the first real snow clings like lace. Before you go, he leaves you a promise. If they drown out the world again, he says, I will be there. I will not shout them down. I will take away the echo. Joke 3 whispered, somewhere, Hermes misplaces a prank because the silence swallows the footsteps he uses to measure his mischief. Poor guy. He'll find it later, probably in his other winged sandal. You breathe, slow and warm, and the mountain breathes with you. The hush is not empty. It's the beginning. You follow the Titan down toward the valley where lamps glow like patient stars, and you begin to see how his hidden years look. Not grand gestures, not statues, just tiny hinges on which big doors swing. A fisherman shakes a knotted net and curses the wind. Kratos is the pause between the curses, the slow breath that lets the man find the snag and unknot it. A potter's wheel wobbles. Kratos is the steady hand on the table leg so the bowl grows even. A child rasps through a fever. Kratos is the weight of a cool cloth and the tone in the midwife's voice that quiets panic so healing can do its quiet work. If miracles are fireworks, he is the matchbox. Small, unflashy, the reason the spark even gets a chance. The village wakes with the olive press before dawn. Grinding stones turn, smell of green fruit and wet wood rising from the troughs. Someone mutters that Athena must be smiling on them. Someone else prays to Demeter for a kind winter. When the yield is good, the gods get the thanks. When the stones crack or the axle squeals and throws a belt, the mortals blame themselves. Kratos moves through both moments like still water through a channel, smoothing the turbulence, not asking for credit. You watch him carry nothing except attention, which turns out to be heavier than iron when given at the right time. At the public fountain, an old man counts time on a clepsydra, one of those water clocks that empty at a strict pace, and grumbles when a boy kicks it and throws off the minutes. He claims he's keeping track of speeches so nobody hogs the platform, which is a very Athenian hobby. Mainstream fact check tucked neatly in here. In the classical city, timing speeches with water clocks was a real thing because citizens took turns in courts and assemblies, and someone had to stop that one guy who never shuts up. Kratos smiles at the trickle and with a subtle touch clears the spout. The stream evens. The old man's brow unknots. Order restored, and not a single thunderbolt required. Up on a hill, a litter of goats organizes a small union and refuses to move until their shepherd plays the reed pipe better than yesterday. You snort softly. Even the livestock has notes. Kratos steps near, and the goats settle because the quiet settles, and peace, as it turns out, tastes like clover. Joke 1, filed and grazed. In the market, you drift past jars of honey and strings, of garlic, bronze tools and clay lamps, with little mouths for flames. A symposium forms in a courtyard, citizens leaning on cushions, philosophy getting poured with the wine, quirk for the night. The wine is almost always watered, often 3 parts water to 1 part wine, mixed in a big bowl called a crater, because nobody wants the philosopher to start debating the furniture after cup 3. Kratos leans where the laughter gets sharp and sandpapers it down just enough. So a clever barb turns into a clever wink and not a feud. Across every city, across years, he keeps the edges from cutting. Don't they notice? You ask, watching offerings arranged under a little shrine to Hermes. Sometimes, Kratos says, sometimes a mortal thanks the quiet. Usually they thank the figure carved in stone. He's not bitter when he says it, just descriptive. It's like being the power strip at a party. The music and lights get the cheers. The outlet in the corner does the work. Joke 2. If shrines had Wi-Fi, the password would be Zeus 23. And Zeus would still claim he invented routers. He leads you to a narrow alley where a mother and daughter mend a fishing basket. The girl keeps pricking her thumb, tired and teary. Kratos kneels, and the air around the needle seems to slow. The next stitch lands clean, then the next, and the next. The girl grins like sunrise. Across the street, a baker pulls flat loaves from a clay oven, taps them with his knuckle to hear the finished drum note. He doesn't know the draft that ruined yesterday's batch has been nudged away like a bothersome fly. He only knows today tastes better. Night after night, year after year, Kratos gathers these small victories like sea glass. He doesn't hoard them. He holds them up to the light and puts them back where he found them. The gods above, meanwhile, treat the world like a stage. Hermes collects applause, the way the clever pickpocket collects rings. Apollo practices his best angles for the dawn. Ares, well, he keeps a second spear just for polishing. Historians still argue whether the big stories, Homer's, the famous ones, were sung by one poet or woven by many mouths over many nights. Either way, those songs love the spotlight. Kratos, by design, stands just outside it, catching the hot spill and cooling it so mortals don't burn. Time lopes forward with lion shoulders. A generation of children grows. A generation of elders shrinks into their stories, which Kratos keeps from turning sour. A traveling philosopher makes the rounds, refuses to eat beans because his teacher's teacher swore they cloud the mind. A fringe tidbit you heard once and are now cursed to remember forever. You imagine Kratos nodding politely and stepping between the man and a boiling pot of bean stew, not to save him from fate, just to save the dinner from a debate about legumes. Sometimes, late, he sits on a flat stone by the road and listens to the wheels of carts sighing over ruts. He doesn't sleep much. Titans don't really need it, but he rests in the way a harbor rests, by letting the tide work while he holds the shape of the shore. Once, You catch him smiling at a cat expertly, ignoring everyone except the one person who needs a lapful of purring. Quiet recognizes quiet. Still, the laughter from above grows thicker, like varnish layered over a painting, until the colors struggle to breathe. The Olympians do help. Temples host healers, oracles guide the lost, festivals bind cities together with rhythm and bread. But they also like the credit. Like anyone with a good press agent, when a storm spares a harvest, a poet writes an ode to Zeus. When a soldier keeps his temper and goes home instead of picking a fight, his friends say Athena must have whispered sense into his ear. When a city survives a hard season by sharing loaves and labor, a priest proclaims Demeter's favor, and the crowd cheers itself for being beloved. Kratos watches, approves of the mercy, and says nothing about the little nudges he gave to make the mercy possible. You notice it first, in the pauses of songs, the space where a name could go if there were a name for the pause itself. Fewer people look up at dawn and thank the calm. More of them point at the brightest cloud and declare it an autograph. The muses, who are not cruel so much as busy, begin to trim their verses for clarity. Clarity becomes tidiness. Tidiness becomes forgetting. Up on Olympus, where the goblets catch two suns, the real one and the one reflected in the gold, someone makes a joke about how silence is just empty space between applause. It gets a big laugh because jokes about the crew are always popular with the cast. Kratos keeps walking. He steadies another cart, meets another child's frightened eye, and returns it calmer, fixes a door latch with a twist you don't even see, and leaves a fisherman with just enough patience to rebait the hook. You wonder if he aches. He does, but it's not the ache of being ignored. It's the ache of hearing the world and not being able to turn the volume knob exactly where it should be. Joke 3. If the world were a radio, the gods keep leaning on the boost bass button. Kratos just wants everyone to understand the lyrics. By now, you can name the pattern. When quiet wins, it looks like nothing happened. When noise wins, it looks like everything did. That's an unfair scoreboard. The Titan understands, and still he chooses his work. You sit beside him on the stone by the road, the night unrolling like ink across a scroll. How long, you ask? He shrugs the way. Mountains shrug. Slow, inevitable, as long as they let me do good without asking my name. He says, you hear no bitterness, and that almost hurts more. From the heights, a faint chord of lyre and laughter drifts down, an invisible ribbon tying the world's top to its bottom. It is beautiful, honestly. It is also loud. Somewhere between one breath and the next, you feel the balance lean. The quiet is still here, still strong, but the spotlight above has widened, and it spills across every village roof. You look at Kratos. He looks at the sky. The years of being hidden have done their work. They have saved lives and steadied hands. They have also taught Olympus a habit. Take the bow, forget the crew. Slow resolve begins to pool at the edges of the road like rain gathering towards a flood. You sense the next hinge turning, the one that will decide what happens when the spotlight blinds the stage. The hush doesn't end. It hardens. Dawn brushes pale gold on the ridge, and you feel the world hold its breath, the way it does right before someone changes the subject. Kratos stands beside you like a quiet wall. The laughter from above keeps floating down, smooth as honey. The problem with smooth is that it hides the grit. You follow the Titan toward a spring where oaks lean close, and there, on a flat stone that feels older than any plan, you meet memory herself, Mnemosyne. The water is so clear, you can count every pebble on the bottom. Clear water, clear minds, clear songs. That, at least, is the theory. You kneel by the spring. The air tastes like mint and cold tin. The 9 sisters step out of the trees the way a chord steps out of silence. The muses, their hair glints like fresh ink. You know pieces of their story from school or a podcast. In Hesiod's old poem, Theogony, he names them Calliope and the rest, daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, patrons of song, history, dance, and the arts. That's your steady fact for the night, set on the table like bread. They bow to their mother, then to the sky. Zeus does not walk down. Zeus rarely does. He sends words instead, the way kings send orders and influencers send emails. The order is simple. Trim the noise. Keep praise tidy. Remove confusing parts. Most of all, erase the awkward name that keeps trying to grow in the gap between lines. If a singer pauses with thanks on the tongue for the hush that saved a life, the singer must swallow. If a poet writes about calm hands in a crisis, the poet must find a shinier cause. If a child whispers, thanks to a presence that steadied her breath, the wind should carry it away. Like fog, Kratos hears the order. He doesn't flinch. Quiet doesn't flinch. It absorbs. You watch the sisters work. They do not stab letters or smash tablets. They do what silence excels at: subtraction. A verse loses a syllable here. A chorus tightens there. A little blank opens where a name might have sat, warm and waiting. It looks cleaner. It also looks colder. Joke 1. This is the divine version of, we're not firing you. We're just removing your login. The muses mean well. They always do. Art likes a clean line. Zeus likes being the line everyone follows. Down in the city, scribes smooth wax tablets with the flat side of a stylus, warming the surface and wiping away yesterday's notes. You see the trick. You don't have to break a story to change it. You just have to reheat it until the details blur. The Titan stands by a wall where names of donors have been carved in tidy columns. A chisel taps. A mason fills a letter with new stone dust and rubs until the groove forgets it was ever a groove. You feel the same ache you felt at the water clock when the spout clogged. Only now the clog is in memory itself. Kratos walks among people who still feel him, but cannot name him. A sailor grips a rope in a squall and does not panic. He thanks Poseidon. A midwife keeps her voice low and sure, bringing a child into the world without fear's shadow. She thanks Hera. A judge listens longer than his pride wants him to, and chooses mercy instead of show. He thanks Athena. All good names, all fine thanks, and yet the blank space inside each prayer grows heavy, the way a pocket fills with sand you forgot was there. It is not wrong to thank them. Kratos says, almost teasing, like he's reminding you to hydrate. It is wrong to forget that calm is a gift too. On a roadside shrine, someone has left a little clay figure with no face, only a smooth oval where features should be. It is meant to be any god or every god. You run your thumb across it and feel a small dent where a name could have been carved. Fringe tidbit for your late night toolbox. People in the ancient world sometimes used lead curse tablets, thin sheets scratched with pleas, to bind a rival's tongue or trip an enemy's plans. Rolled up and tucked into wells or graves, the urge to control what others say is old. The methods just change fonts. Joke 2. Somewhere in Hades, there is a filing cabinet labeled Customer Service Curses, and the poor clerk is on scroll number 8 million. At the spring, Mnemosyne says nothing, which is the hardest answer to hear. She is mother to the muses, and also mother to forgetting, because memory that refuses to share space with silence becomes noise. You ask the soft question anyway. Why obey? The sisters look at you with tired kindness, because keeping songs alive sometimes means trimming what gets them banned, one says. Because a city under war wants hard drums, not lullabies, says another. Because he asked, says a third. And you don't have to ask who he is. Historians still argue whether royal power in old city-states controlled poets directly or mostly by fashion and favor. But every age learns the same lesson. If the boss pays the band, the boss picks the set list. The erasure spreads like a rumor that nobody will admit repeating. A teacher in a gymnasium corrects a boy who thanks the calm god for a clear head on exam day. The teacher laughs, tells him the proper names, rattles off Zeus, Athena, Hermes, all the way down the roll. Call, the boy nods, less sure now about the thing he felt in his chest. In a workshop, a smith hums a line from a hymn that once had an extra beat after the word mercy. The extra beat is gone. The song fits better in parades. It fits worse in homes. You sit with Kratos by a fig tree with leaves like soft hands. His face is steady stone. They are good at their craft, he says of the sisters, without spite, and they are used. The branch above you creaks. A ripe fig drops, splats on the ground, scents the air like sugar smashed into sun. You think of the Roman phrase you once read, damnatio memoriae, the formal scraping of a name from walls and coins, when power wants a person to vanish. But you keep the thought to yourself. Different empire, same trick. Joke 3. Somewhere a bureaucrat is inventing the eraser and calling it a moral improvement. That afternoon, a traveling rhapsode performs in the square, voice strong as a rope, hands shaping heroes out of air. The crowd leans in. His rhythm is a boat everyone climbs into together. He sings of storms met with courage, of quarrels that stop just before blood, of cities rescued by restraint. And each time, at the moment when the singer might have named the quiet that saved the day, he names a brighter god instead. And the crowd nods, because names are easier to clap for than pauses. When he passes the hat, coins ring like little shields. He bows to the altar at the corner. You feel the tiny draft when a bit of truth slips out the door. Night comes on like deep silk. The Titan keeps moving, but something in his stride has shifted. Not anger. The loud kind burns fast and leaves you empty. This is weight. You remember his promise on the ridge. If they drown out the world, he will take away the echo. Erasing his name is not just dismissal, it is theft. Not of fame. He never wanted a statue. Of balance. If the song has only drums, it stops being music. It becomes marching. And marching, unchecked, flattens what it means to be small and safe. Up on Olympus, a toast is made to harmony, which is funny in a cruel way, because it takes a choir to sing harmony, and one voice is getting turned down until it is more rumor than note. Hermes tells a joke about someone who thinks still water should headline the festival. It gets a big laugh, of course. Apollo tunes his lyre to a brightness that makes the stars squint. Zeus lifts a cup, sees his face doubled in the wine, and likes the view. He likes many views. He especially likes the ones that confirm him. In the valley, the old man with the water clock brings his jar to the fountain. The stream that was cleared yesterday runs true for now. He watches the water slip away and measures justice by the bowl. You think of time and songs and how both are measured by what is allowed to flow. Kratos sets a hand on the old man's shoulder, light as dew. The old man smiles without knowing why. But even here, on this small and honest street, a sign has been hung in the air. Please do not mention the quiet. You turn toward the mountain again. The air feels thinner, as if someone has taken a slice from it and stored that slice behind a gold door. They took your name, you say, and it feels braver to say it aloud. Kratos nods. Names are for calling, he answers. If they cannot call me, I must come uncalled. The edge in his voice is not sharp. It is heavy, the kind of heavy that anchors boats, holds bridges, stops doors from slamming in the wind. Somewhere, a goat bleats, like it remembers yesterday's union meeting. Somewhere a cat finds a lap and proves that not all quiet is lost, but the scale has moved and you feel it in the bones of the hill. The place where patience lives has been taxed to pay for thunder. The Titan rises. The world, which has enjoyed not knowing his name, is about to learn his purpose all over again. You and the Titan move like a low tide through sleeping streets, and you can feel the oath from the spring riding in his stride. It does not hurry him. It steadies him. He begins where quiet already has friends. At the river bend, reeds click like soft teeth in the wind, and the water writes its long sentence toward the sea. You kneel at the bank. The mud feels cool and patient. When Kratos whispers, the current turns its head the way a horse does when it recognizes a hand. Naiads rise, not dramatic fountains, just a thickening of light where water gathers itself. Their eyes look like moons seen through rain. He does not ask them to flood fields or drown enemies. He asks for roots. Carry messages where noise cannot go, he says. Slip under doors made of pride. They smile because water has been slipping under doors since doors were invented. One shows how the mill race can hum a pattern that only careful ears catch. Another promises to nudge fallen twigs into arrows so night travelers find the safer ford. The river agrees to soften echoes around certain altars. just enough that boasts sound silly to the one making them. Revenge, you learn again, can be as gentle as a hand on the volume knob. Downstream, barges nose the bank. Eyes are painted on some prows. An old habit across the sea-lapped world, because ships see better with luck looking forward. That's your quirky tidbit for the road. The paint is cheap, the comfort priceless. A fisherman taps his boat's painted pupil for luck and mutters that Hermes can borrow one if he promises not to steal the other. Joke 1. Somewhere Hermes is starting a side hustle, selling replacement eyes to sailors who swear the original wandered off. Owls wait for you on the town's tiled roofs. Little Athene Noctua shapes with heads like coins that can swivel the night into focus. One lands on Kratos' wrist as if it's always been his perch. The sound it makes is not spooky, it's practical, like a drawer closing softly. These birds will map winds for him, will blink twice at crossroads where guards dozed off, will carry thin twine signals from ridge to ridge without anyone thinking more than, an owl. You remember a solid fact to tuck under your tongue. The Athenians stamped owls on their silver tetradrachms, and those owls paid their way across the Mediterranean in the 5th century BCE, famous enough that traders recognized them at a glance. Historians still argue whether Athens' power rode more on that Laurian silver or on sharp naval policy and tribute. But either way, a small bird bought big boats. The owl on Kratos' wrist blinks like it knows its resume. In the old quarter, where soot stains the eaves, and every alley smells like heat slept here, you find the forges. No sign over the door, no temple patron's name, just the rhythm of hammers and the sigh of bellows, the kind of music that doesn't need applause. Quiet smiths step out, shoulders bright with spark burns that look like constellations you could navigate by. They are not friends of parades. They are friends of fit and balance. Kratos does not flatter them. He climbs the 3 worn steps to the threshold the way a man climbs into a boat that can sink or save him, and says simply, "I need joinery that leaves no bruise." They nod because the request has shape they understand. One brings a scale with plates thin as leaves. Another holds out wire drawn fine as hair, high carbon and well behaved under the hammer. You notice a clay vessel near the quenching tub, the water black with use, bellows patched with careful stitches. The smell is familiar, charcoal and iron, and that ghost of vinegar, metal workers swear, helps keep edges honest. Historians still argue whether craftsmen in classical Greece banded together like later guilds, or stayed looser, more family and shop than oath and charter. But the room around you feels like a guild regardless. Shared tricks, shared silence, shared standards that do not need a herald. Kratos lays a palm on the anvil. 2 things, he says: a chain that holds without cutting, a feather that weighs what pride claims and shows the truth. He does not describe the chain's links yet. You will see them later, shaped like open hands, but you can already feel the logic, restraint that doesn't humiliate. As for the feather, the smiths grin the way problem solvers do when someone asks for something impossible, but good. A girl no taller than the workbench brings a slice of hammered bronze so thin it moves when you sigh. "We'll make it sing," she says, and the room believes her. You and the Titan make the rounds by lamplight, rope splicers, whose knots can be untied in an instant by anyone shown the trick, archivists who copy city rules without the usual embroidery and keep the plain versions for when plain truth is needed, midwives who know the sound of honest apology and will vouch for it if the loud try to drown it. Remember that cat who chooses the lap that needs a purr? There it is again, tail question marking, escorting you like a furry usher to every person whose craft touches real life where it lives. Doors, bread, breath. A night watchman joins you at a corner and taps his staff twice in a code every other watchman knows, but few citizens hear. Kratos listens, then changes the pattern by one tap, a small adjustment so that in 3 nights the route will not line up with a planned ambush. He is not moving armies, he is moving moments. Joke 2. Somewhere Ares is filling out a complaint form labeled, "Why is everybody calmer all of a sudden?" and misplacing it under a helm. By the river again, the naiads show you a trick with reeds. Notch them so they buzz at a certain wind, and you can tell from your bed whether a storm is arriving angry or just tired. People will sleep better and yell less in the morning. The owls offer something in return for the steady wrist, a path above the main gate, where the wind always slides right to left at the 3rd hour of night, a detail that will matter when a certain feather needs to fall. True, you store it like a pebble in a pocket. A stonecutter asks for a word, palms white with dust. He has learned, by measuring with the same string all week, that one of the temple steps is a finger's width too high. He plans to shave it in the morning, not because anyone ordered it, but because children trip on that kind of pride disguised as grandeur. Kratos nods and thanks him as if the man just rerouted a river. In a way, he did. Quiet is full of small boulders placed just right. You drift by the gymnasium, where philosophers argue in cloaks, even when it's warm, and one of them, the beans avoidant disciple, whose diet you cannot stop remembering, pauses mid-lecture when a street kid asks a good, simple question. Kratos does nothing visible, and yet the man answers the child with care, lays down the words like stepping stones. Somewhere, a future that would have snapped shuts like a trap. Now it clicks like a latch. Joke 3. Beans still not served, but humility gets a plate. From a back room near the forge comes a hiss and a cheer. The first test strip of metal has taken the temper the girl promised. When the smiths quench it, the steam smells like wet wool and pennies and victory. You think of stories about meteors and star iron, of legends that the best edges fall from the sky. The smith with the spark constellation shoulders winks and says, "The best edges fall from listening." He puts the strip on your palm. It hums at a touch, a high truth-telling note. Across the market, a baker slides loaves from the oven and sets one on a sill for anyone who needs it. He's done that since his father did. A ritual quieter than incense. He has no idea he just joined a conspiracy to keep the world humane. A midwife passes, squeezes the baker's arm, and moves on. Alliances in shadow look like ordinary kindness, aiming in the same direction. Word moves without trumpets. You can tell because doors open with the soft click of a latch that doesn't stick. because dogs who bark twice decide not to bark a third. Time, because the old man at the water clock smiles when the stream stays even and decides to lend the boy a real counting cord. Your hand remembers the smooth stone from the oath. Your ear remembers the owl's path above the gate. Your eyes remember the way the river wrote arrows in twigs when the naiads laughed. None of this is a raid. All of it is preparation. When dawn leaks thin milk at the horizon, Kratos has friends in a dozen places that do not make statues. He has routes in water, eyes in the dark, hands at anvils, palms at doorframes, breaths beside beds. He has something louder people forget to collect: consent. Not the shouted kind, the steady kind, the kind that says, "We will help because we like the way the air feels around you." You finally understand why the oath needed allies. Weight spreads better than it drops. The mountain will feel this network like roots, not like ropes. A cock crows with the self-confidence of 10 cocks. The cat yawns and changes allies to the baker, as cats do. The owl lifts and writes a silent line into the brightening air. The river's skin puckers where a fish kisses it, and a reed hums a note that promises good weather. Somewhere above, a golden cup knocks a golden plate and thinks it sings. Let it think. Down here, the choir is warming up. You and the Titan move like a low tide through sleeping streets, and you can feel the oath from the spring riding in his stride. It does not hurry him. It steadies him. He begins where quiet already has friends. At the river bend, reeds click like soft teeth in the wind, and the water writes its long sentence toward the sea. You kneel at the bank. The mud feels cool and patient. When Kratos whispers, the current turns its head the way a horse does when it recognizes a hand. Naiads rise. Not dramatic fountains, just a thickening of light where water gathers itself. Their eyes look like moons seen through rain. He does not ask them to flood fields or drown enemies. He asks for roots, carry messages where noise cannot go. He says, slip under doors made of pride. They smile because water has been slipping under doors since doors were invented. One shows how the mill race can hum a pattern that only careful ears catch. Another promises to nudge fallen twigs into arrows so night travelers find the safer ford. The river agrees to soften echoes around certain altars, just enough that boasts sound silly to the one making them. Revenge, you learn again, can be as gentle as a hand on the volume knob. Downstream, barges nose the bank. Eyes are painted on some prows. An old habit across the sea-lapped world, because ships see better with luck looking forward. That's your quirky tidbit for the road. The paint is cheap, the comfort priceless. A fisherman taps his boat's painted pupil for luck and mutters that Hermes can borrow one if he promises not to steal the other. Joke 1. Somewhere Hermes is starting a side hustle, selling replacement eyes to sailors who swear the original wandered off. Owls wait for you on the town's tiled roofs. Little Athene Noctua shapes, with heads like coins that can swivel the night into focus. One lands on Kratos' wrist, as if it's always been his perch. The sound it makes is not spooky, it's practical, like a drawer closing softly. These birds will map winds for him, will blink twice at crossroads where guards dozed off, will carry thin twine signals from ridge to ridge without anyone thinking more than, huh, an owl. You remember a solid fact to tuck under your tongue. The Athenians stamped owls on their silver tetradrachms, and those owls paid their way across the Mediterranean in the 5th century BCE, famous enough that traders recognized them at a glance. Historians still argue whether Athens' power rode more on that Laurian silver or on sharp naval policy and tribute. But either way, a small bird bought big boats. The owl on Kratos' wrist blinks like it knows its resume. In the old quarter, where soot stains the eaves, and every alley smells like heat slept here, you find the forges. No sign over the door, no temple patron's name, just the rhythm of hammers and the sigh of bellows, the kind of music that doesn't need applause. Quiet smiths step out, shoulders bright with spark burns that look like constellations you could navigate by. They are not friends of parades, they are friends of fit and balance. Kratos does not flatter them. He climbs the 3 worn steps to the threshold, the way a man climbs into a boat that can sink or save him, and says simply, I need joinery that leaves no bruise. They nod, because the request has shape they understand. One brings a scale with plates thin as leaves. Another holds out wire drawn fine as hair, high carbon and well-behaved under the hammer. You notice a clay vessel near the quenching tub, the water black with use, bellows patched with careful stitches. The smell is familiar, charcoal and iron, and that ghost of vinegar metal workers swear helps keep edges honest. Historians still argue whether craftsmen in classical Greece banded together like later guilds, or stayed looser, more family and shop than oath and charter. But the room around you feels like a guild regardless. Shared tricks, shared silence, shared standards that do not need a herald. Kratos lays a palm on the anvil. 2 things, he says. A chain that holds without cutting, a feather that weighs what pride claims and shows the truth. He does not describe the chain's links yet. You will see them later, shaped like open hands, but you can already feel the logic, restraint that doesn't humiliate. As for the feather, the smiths grin the way problem solvers do when someone asks for something impossible, but good. A girl no taller than the workbench brings a slice of hammered bronze so thin it moves when you sigh. We'll make it sing, she says, and the room believes her. You and the Titan make the rounds by lamplight, rope splicers whose knots can be untied in an instant by anyone shown the trick, archivists who copy city rules without the usual embroidery and keep the plain versions for when plain truth is needed, midwives who know the sound of honest apology and will vouch for it if the loud try to drown it. Remember that cat who chooses the lap that needs a purr? There it is again, tail question marking, escorting you like a furry usher to every person whose craft touches real life where it lives. Doors, bread, breath. A night watchman joins you at a corner and taps his staff twice in a code every other watchman knows, but few citizens hear. Kratos listens, then changes the pattern by 1 tap. A small adjustment so that in 3 nights the route will not line up with a planned ambush. He is not moving armies, he is moving moments. Joke 2. Somewhere Ares is filling out a complaint form labeled Why is everybody calmer all of a sudden and misplacing it under a helm? By the river again, the naiads show you a trick with reeds. Notch them so they buzz at a certain wind, and you can tell from your bed whether a storm is arriving angry or just tired. People will sleep better and yell less in the morning. The owls offer something in return for the steady wrist, a path above the main gate where the wind always slides right to left at the third hour of night, a detail that will matter when a certain feather needs to fall. True, you store it like a pebble in a pocket. A stonecutter asks for a word, palms white with dust. He has learned, by measuring with the same string all week, that one of the temple steps is a finger's width too high. He plans to shave it in the morning, not because anyone ordered it, but because children trip on that kind of pride. Disguised as grandeur, Kratos nods and thanks him, as if the man just rerouted a river. In a way, he did. Quiet is full of small boulders, placed just right. You drift by the gymnasium, where philosophers argue in cloaks even when it's warm, and one of them, the beans avoidant disciple whose diet you cannot stop remembering, pauses mid-lecture when a street kid asks a good, simple question. Kratos does nothing visible, and yet the man answers the child with care, lays down the words like stepping stones. Somewhere, a future that would have snapped shuts like a trap. Now it clicks like a latch. Joke 3. Beans still not served, but humility gets a plate. From a back room near the forge comes a hiss and a cheer. The first test strip of metal has taken the temper the girl promised. When the smiths quench it, the steam smells like wet wool and pennies and victory. You think of stories about meteors and star iron, of legends that the best edges fall from the sky. The smith with the spark constellation shoulders winks and says, "The best edges fall from listening." He puts the strip on your palm. It hums at a touch, a high truth-telling note. Across the market, a baker slides loaves from the oven and sets one on a sill for anyone who needs it. He's done that since his father did, a ritual quieter than incense. He has no idea he just joined a conspiracy to keep the world humane. A midwife passes, squeezes the baker's arm, and moves on. Alliances in shadow look like ordinary kindness, aiming in the same direction. Word moves without trumpets. You can tell because doors open with the soft click of a latch that doesn't stick. Because dogs who bark twice decide not to bark a third time. Because the old man at the water clock smiles when the stream stays even and decides to lend the boy a real counting cord. Your hand remembers the smooth stone from the oath. Your ear remembers the owl's path above the gate. Your eyes remember the way the river wrote arrows and twigs when the naiads laughed. None of this is a raid. All of it is preparation. When dawn leaks thin milk at the horizon, Kratos has friends in a dozen places that do not make statues. He has roots in water, eyes in the dark, hands at anvils, palms at doorframes, breaths beside beds. He has something louder people forget to collect. Consent, not the shouted kind, the steady kind, the kind that says, "We will help because we like the way the air feels around you." You finally understand why the oath needed allies. Weight spreads better than it drops. The mountain will feel this network like roots, not like ropes. A cock crows, With the self-confidence of 10 cocks, the cat yawns and changes allies to the baker as cats do. The owl lifts and writes a silent line into the brightening air. The river's skin puckers where a fish kisses it, and a reed hums a note that promises good weather. Somewhere above, a golden cup knocks a golden plate and thinks it sings. Let it think. Down here, the choir is warming up. You climb the flank roads with Kratos, while the city rinses sleep from its eyes, and the work turns from gathering friends to measuring the world. He listens to stone. He times the wind. He treats Olympus not like a fortress to smash, but like a song to learn by ear. You keep pace, counting steps between switchbacks, counting breaths between the owl's blinks, counting how often the clouds snag on certain ridges and slide right off others. Patterns grow visible the way stars appear when you stop staring and start soft looking. The Titan marks 4 old names in dust with his fingertip: Boreas, Notus, Zephyrus, Eurus, and nods like he's greeting neighbors across a fence. You taste each in the air. Boreas is dry and sharp, like cracked ice. Notus carries wet heat that turns tempers sticky. Zephyrus, kind west wind, smells faintly of bread. Eurus is restless, all elbows. He shows you how the anemoi wrap the peak at certain hours so footsteps disappear into moving air, and how a feather might drift true instead of being tossed. You blink. Yes, feather. We'll get to that. At a saddle above a pine belt, you find a cluster of stones set up like a small, forgotten shrine. Kratos kneels and squares the stones until their shadows line up at noon. He is building a clock you can't carry, so you carry it in your head. The 3rd hour after dark, he says. Boreas owns this notch. The 7th, the north rests and the west laughs. He smiles. The gate heard from here will open then. Joke 1. Olympus apparently runs on shift schedules, like a very glamorous bakery. Downslope, in a village that clings to the mountain's skirt, he borrows an empty storeroom. The smiths you met bring their careful tools, and the room becomes a workshop of hush. No banner over the door, just a cat sauntering in like a quality inspector with tenure. On the table lies a rectangular frame of cedar that has been sanded so smooth your fingertips can't find a splinter. Over it, the girl with the bronze slice stretches a gauze of hammered leaf so thin it asks silence before it moves. Feather, she says simply, not for flying, for weighing things that insist they are weightless. Kratos sets the frame on a stand with a spindle that lets it turn to face whichever wind he needs. Beneath the leaf, he strings 3 hair-fine wires to little tongues, reeds cut and cured until each sings a tiny pitch. If pride gusts your way, the leaf flutters and the tongues chime out of tune. If truth sits steady, the chords align. He will walk with this, not as a weapon, but as a teacher you can hold up to a liar's face without raising your voice. You remember the old man's water clock and smile. Different tool, same manners. On another bench grows the chain. Not iron cuffs, nothing with teeth. Links shaped like open hands, palm to palm, each hinge designed to settle against skin without biting. The quiet smiths use a quench full of something that smells faintly of vinegar and thyme, a trick they learned from a traveler with long road dust on his sandals, and the metal comes out calm, not brittle. The chain will hold a door just barely ajar, will keep a spear arm from finishing its arc, will ask a god to wait and, outrageously, be believed because there is no insult in the touch. Historians still argue whether classical workshops shared formulas like guild secrets or spread them by marriage and apprenticeship and gossip. But you watch the knowledge pass here like bread around a table. No ledger, just trust. You take breaks to walk the ridges with the owls. They map quieter routes in the air, tiny highways above cypress and laurel. One owl shows you the wash of wind that always curls left at the main gate's lintel. Useless trivia unless you ever plan to drop a whisper exactly where a sentry's ear isn't. You plan to. The naiads, lazy in sunlit shallows, promise to bump floating leaves in a pattern if patrols change early. A watchman taps his staff twice at the cross street and changes his tune on the third hour because Kratos asked him to try a new pattern for luck. It will matter later. You can feel future weight gathering like rain. You smell before you see it. You pass a mountain hut where a healer dries laurel leaves and burns them in a tiny clay bowl to sweeten the room. She laughs when you sniff and says the smoke clears. The head, fringe tidbit to file. Some said the Delphic priestess chewed laurel and breathed strange fumes. Others said the god simply found the right voice. Historians still argue whether fault gases like ethylene rose through Apollo's floorboards or whether the trance was training, theater, or grace. You keep the laurel's clean scent anyway. It clings to your cloak and makes the day feel newly washed. Maps multiply. On a plank, you draw a child's version of Olympus. Gates, courtyards, that showy hall whose doors always open outward because certain people like to be seen arriving. You pencil in peacock's tracks. Hera's birds have a routine, bless them, and make a note to scratch. Apollo is least watchful at first light, fiddling with a perfect chord while the actual sun does its job. Joke 2. Never schedule a heist during golden hour. Influencers and sun gods alike get distracted. Kratos pockets a small pouch of chalk. Echo lives in corners, he says. If you cloud the corners, loudness loses perches. You dust 3 recessed joints along the training yard's wall and whisper. And when Ares later bellows there, the sound climbs, but doesn't multiply. The yard feels odd, like a tavern after someone hangs heavy curtains. No one notices the change, only that they leave less riled. Olympus will call it a slow day. You call it -1 echo. Mainstream fact to tuck. When you finally drop back to the city for supplies, you pass the Tower of the Winds in Athens. Octagonal marble. 8 reliefs of breezy gods. Later than the myths, but older than you by a long chalk, where a weather vane once turned and a water clock hummed inside. It's a real building, measuring invisible things. Just like your frame and chain, you take that as an omen wearing architect's clothes. Inside the storeroom again, you test the feather. The girl hums a note, and the reed tongues answer true. The cat strolls under the table, tail up, and the leaf sighs, but stays level. Kratos names the tool with the simplest word, measure. Then, palm on the open hand links, he names the chain. Wait, neither word threatens. Both change rooms when they arrive. You get why he avoids thrones. These two words are rule enough. On a hillside terrace, you and the Titan watch lines of ants carrying crumb boulders. He points at a fissure where the breeze always sighs. There, he says, we walk loud, and they will not hear. You and the owls practice the approach, staying just inside that sigh until your steps feel erased. Joke 3. Hermes would hate that you've hacked his brand. Sneaking, with nothing but geology and patience. He'll live. You tie other knots in your net. Archivists agree to keep 2 copies of new decrees, the tidy version and the real one. Bakers start placing the extra loaf on the sill a little earlier so Night Watch can eat before tempers get brittle. A weaver who has figured out that the third loom nail from the left squeaks when damp promises to make a coverlet that hushes the squeak so a certain guest chamber won't announce your visit. None of this would win a bard's contest, and yet all of it makes the floor less slippery when you step into danger. You tack small warding faces, gorgonia carved on clay discs, above 3 doors where you know panic likes to gather. Are they magic? Sometimes the only spell is a reminder. Breathe before you shout. People have pinned little offerings at shrines shaped like hands or eyes, or the body part that hurt, hoping for healing. You've seen clay legs and arms, and once a tiny ear. The world loves symbols you can touch. Your feather and chain belong to that tribe. Talismans with jobs. When you finish wrapping the chain in soft wool so it won't clink, you feel like a parent sending a shy child to school with a good lunch. Evenings, you rehearse. You walk past the lower gate at the hour Boreas owns the notch and listen to your own breath vanish into the current. You practice setting the feather on a ledge until it learns the mountain's pulse and stops jumping at every squirrel. You must hand the chain to the quiet smith with the constellation shoulders and ask him to hold your wrist while you try to pull free. His grip, your chain, does not hurt. It simply says, later. It is astonishing how often later is the same as never. The valley keeps living. A teacher chalks a problem on a tablet, and for the first time, lets the clever Bean-averse philosopher be wrong in public without letting the class turn mean. A watcher at the fountain mends a crack so the stream stays even. A boy ties a ribbon to the cat, changes his mind, and lets the cat be the cat. Each is a rehearsal for a bigger kindness you're about to attempt at the top of the world. You sit with Kratos on a ledge where the sky is so close, it feels like you could wrinkle it with your thumb. He cradles the feather frame. You loop the chain over your shoulder, warm through the wool. We won't break the door, he says. We'll make it open inward for once. You imagine golden hinges, surprised by their own kindness, and almost laugh. The mountain cools the heat in your chest. The wind brings you olive smoke and a hint of laurel. Above, Olympus glows with its usual theater lighting. Everything is measured now. Winds, hours, habits, echo perches. Even prides flutter under a thin leaf. You know which stones wobble and which steps lie. The path upward is not easier, but it is legible. Revenge is no longer a fire. It is a map. You reach the place where mountains lean over the sea like old friends, and the air changes keys. Salt writes crystals on your lips. Gulls stitch white commas across the blue. The first trial waits where noise has always practiced. On water, Poseidon's mood today is that cousin who tells a story with elbows. Kratos stands on a narrow pier that creaks like a shy door. He doesn't stamp or shout. He sets the feather frame on a piling, lets Zephyrus test it with a soft breath, and watches the leaf tremble. You can hear the 3 reed tongues beneath it, 1 true, 2 slightly sour. Pride in the wind, he murmurs, not anger. Remember the barge eyes you saw earlier? They watch too, painted patience, keeping brave faces. A fishing skiff noses out, deck bright with wet rope. The younger oarsman is frantic, all splash, all hurry. Kratos lifts his palm, and the chain, wait, rests across the boy's wrists like a cool towel. Not a shackle, not a scold, just time given a shape. The oars find rhythm, and the boat's panic drains into the keel. Measure it, the Titan says, and you hold the feather to the breeze. The leaf steadies, the tongues agree. The sea likes to be sung to in tempo. Mainstream fact for the wake behind us: the Greeks built triremes with 3 tiers of oars, rowers trained like musicians, and won a very real battle at Salamis in 480 BCE because rhythm beat raw noise on water. Historians still argue whether civic pride or hard coin kept those rowers loyal, but anyone who's tried to move a couch with 4 friends knows cadence wins, a wave shoulders the pier. Kratos tips a libation to it from a clay cup, plain water, not wine, and thanks it for the warning, quirk, to tuck in your pocket. Sponge divers in the old Mediterranean sometimes used a scandalopetra, a flat stone they held to drop fast, then let go to float back up, stone as both weight and guide. The image pleases the Titan. He is, after all, a scandalopetra for storms. Down, steady, up again, bringing a diver safely back to breath. Joke 1. Poseidon reads your metaphor, rolls his eyes, and pretends he invented gravity. You leave the pier without fanfare. No trident duel, just a harbor that now hums in even time. Fishermen whose shoulders sink an inch because the wind is listening again. The feather sings true when the nets lift. Your chain hasn't bitten anyone. It has delayed harm. Mercy won. The sea trial passes. The path bends inland to a fold in the earth, a place where oleander grows thick and shadows taste like bronze. Here the second trial waits, the underworld's door, or one of the many small doors people imagine when they bury their loves and hope. It's not the end. The air cools the way a thought cools when it finds words. A figure in a boat-shaped shadow sets a pole against nothing and regards you with the expression of a clerk whose shift never ends. Karen, perhaps, or perhaps only the part of your mind that keeps lists and candles. Kratos does not demand a soul back, does not wave authority like a banner. He sets the feather on a stone at the threshold. The leaf flutters once, then lies calm. He speaks to the boatman as one worker to another. A mother did not say goodbye, he says. I ask a moment. not a theft. The boatman snorts soft. Clerks hate schedule changes and taps the side of his skiff. The chain comes forward in your hands as if it knows its job. You lay it across the opening, not closing the way, not forcing it wider, holding the door at almost closed, allowing a single thread of light to cross. A woman steps into that thread, touches the brow of the boy inside the shadow, and breathes a blessing only she could speak. It lasts the time between two drips of water. Then the chain lifts, the shadow floats, and all is as it was, except grief has one less barb. Mainstream fact to keep the lantern honest. Many Greek burials placed a coin with the dead, often thought of as Charon's fare. Some graves also held tiny gold tablets, Orphic lamellae, with instructions for the soul. Historians still argue whether those tablets marked a wide movement or a narrow cult, and whether Charon's obol was universal or more fashion than law. Quirky detail. A few tablets literally coach the dead, say, "I am a child of earth and starry sky," which feels like ancient two-factor authentication. Joke 2. Somewhere, an underworld gate flashes. Password must include one myth, one star, and a polite greeting. You and Kratos step back into noon. No thunder, no earthquake. Just a mother who will sleep without a dream chasing her down. A hallway, forever. Mercy 2. The underworld trial passes. The last of the three waits in the higher blue. The sky that carries every announcement the loud can commission. Olympus glitters against it like a theater set. You can almost hear rehearsals. The wind names you as you climb. Boreas with his dry cheekbones. Then kinder Zephyrus with bakery breath. At a ledge, the owls showed you. A hawk drops from the glare toward a dove that didn't read the schedule. The feather in your hands feels suddenly heavier, which is funny because it weighs almost nothing. You hold it up, and the leaf chatters. 3. Tongues disagree. Pride again, but this time it's yours. The glow people get from saving things loudly. Kratos touches your wrist. Mercy also waits, he says, for the hawk. He loosens the chain and lets it fall across a pocket of air the owls mapped, an eddy where the current always glides left. The hawk hits that softness and misses by a feather's breadth. The dove learns a new route. The hawk learns a slower stoop. Neither breaks. You swallow. Saving a dove by wounding a hawk would have been theater. Saving both is policy. Mainstream, sky note, pinned like a star. Ancient sailors watched the Pleiades and other constellations to read seasons. The open sea was mostly closed in winter because storm risk spiked. Historians still argue whether Greeks in the archaic period hugged coasts or boldly crossed, but every captain learned the same lesson. Read the sky, don't fight it. Kratos reads that way. He won't fight thunder. He'll choose weather. Bright arch wets the air. Iris, messenger path, and you catch a glimpse of the hall where Apollo tunes his lyre until the sun itself wants to ask for earplugs. You feel, for a heartbeat, the itch to show off the feather to a god, to prove. The measure works by catching a bolt and handing it back like a teacher correcting homework. The reed tongues quiver discordantly in your hands. calling you out. Pride, again. You laugh because the instrument built to expose pride just exposed yours. Joke 3. The feather is that honest friend who tells you there's spinach in your teeth before the date, not after. You test your own voice against the wind. Quiet, not whispering. We aren't here to win, you say, surprised by the shape of the thought. We're here to remove a cheat code. The sky seems to approve. You can't prove that, but the way the leaf steadies feels like an answer. By dusk, you've passed the 3 soft gates, sea, under, sky, without breaking anything that shouldn't be broken. The naiads hum river lullabies that make harbor ropes last a little longer. The boatman in the shadow returns to a workload that is no heavier than it was, but less cruel for one person. The hawk finds the new line and still eats. The dove learns to scan the eddy and still lives. You think of the old man's water clock, the boy's neat counting cord, the smith's constellation shoulders, the baker's extra loaf, the cat's changeable loyalty, the goat union's demands for better music. All of them were rehearsals for this kind of victory. Wins that don't require a loser, a last fact to set beside the bread and olives you share on the ledge. People have long painted statues and temples, even if the paint flakes off, and the future calls it marble white. The Parthenon wore color once. Harmony isn't the absence of hue, it's the agreed blending. Revenge, the Titan shows you, doesn't have to be a new drum line. It can be removing the amplifier and letting actual voices make their own chord. The owls blink. The wind clocks change guard. The feather sleeps in its cedar frame, satisfied with your small humiliations and your smaller rights. The chain coils like a tame river. Kratos watches the peak where you'll go next. Mercy has cleared the way. Measurements have drawn a map. Patience has teeth now, but they are the kind that nibble ropes without cutting skin. Tomorrow, he says, and the mountain answers with the faintest click. Some ledge cooling, some stone settling, as if Olympus itself just realized a door it always pushed might open inward after all. You take the high path where lichens make old maps on stone, and the mountain begins to show its backstage. Kratos sets his palm to a slab and listens. The rock answers in the slow syllables of heat and weight. We won't kick the door, he says. We'll rehang it. The owls sweep ahead, skimming the ridge the way a careful finger tests a flute's holes. You match your breath to the grade, your steps to the steady song the chain and feather have been singing in your hands since the oath. Below, the blue vein of the Peneus threads through a long green throat, the Vale of Tempe, a real gorge cut between Olympus and Ossa, the old gate between Thessaly and the sea. That is a solid fact to pin like a bronze nail. Armies and pilgrims both used that pass, because even myths prefer practical roads. The sight steadies you. If there is a front door, there is also always a side gate where delivery carts once rolled, and someone's cousin kept a spare key. Joke 1. In antiquity, cousin with a key is a recognized job title. You skirt the showy stair that gods use for entrances, doors that swing outward so the applause doesn't have to wait, and tuck into an older cut where meltwater has chewed a channel under the paving. The air is cool and smells of wet lime and laurel smoke that clung to your cloak days ago. Ancient builders loved drains almost as much as they loved drum beats. Terracotta pipes, slot channels, little stone sumps tucked under thresholds to carry the mess away when no one's looking. Kratos smiles at that. Backstage work is his native language. A peacock cries on the parapet with the indignation of a jeweled alarm clock. You roll a fingertip's worth of chalk across the flagstones. The dust lifts on a draft that always slides left where the wall bulges. The owls were right. You step inside that current, and your footsteps go soft, borrowed by the breeze. Up above, Hermes has strung a glittering braid of bells across a service arch because, of course, he has. For safety, he would say, which in Hermes speak means for fun. The chain obliges with its politest mode. You lay one palm-wide link on each bell's mouth, open hand to open mouth. They quiet as if kissed. Somewhere, Hermes feels the absence of a punchline and gets the cosmic hiccups. You find the first trap at a landing where the floor has been waxed to a petty shine. It isn't a pit, it's pride, the kind of surface that makes mortals slip so gods can laugh. You set the feather frame on the rail and blow on it gently. All three reed tongues disagree, a sour chord that hurts in the ears the way a badly tuned lyre hurts in the teeth. Measure, Kratos reminds you. You sift ash from your pouch, the baker's gift, saved from a quiet oven, and dust the stone until the sheen turns honest. The feather settles, the tongues come into tune. The hall is safer. The joke is smaller. Joke 2. Somewhere Ares files a grievance titled Floor Too Fair. Ahead, a bronze door that always opens outward sulks on its hinges. You slip the wool-wrapped chain through the gap and lean, not to pull the door, but to teach it a new direction. The hinges answer with a surprised murmur, the kind stubborn jar lid makes when it finally admits you had the right grip all along. The door swings inward for the first time in centuries, and nobody bruises a shin. You think of the old man's water clock and the boy's counting cord. Tools that change behavior without drama are the best kind of mischief. Down a service ramp, the walls turn from marble brag to rough stone that keeps its own counsel. A slot in the masonry breathes cool, an old culvert, half blocked by time. You crouch and shoulder through with the owls, supervising like tiny union reps. The tunnel bends twice, then rises in a squeeze that smells of iron, beeswax, and the sigh of stored rain. Cyclopean almost. You mutter at the tight joints. Those giant stone stiles you've seen at places like Tyrants and Mycenae. Even if Olympus prefers lighter theater, then catch yourself before the feather tattles on your inner tour guide. Historians still argue whether hidden passages under famous sanctuaries were common practical routes or mostly later legends hung on, a dream of backstage gods. Either way, this one is real enough to scrape your shoulder. At a dogleg, a thin metal wire crosses the crawl space at ankle height. Hermes again. No, this one is Athena's, clever and tidy, attached to a counterweight that would drop a rack of bronze cymbals for an instant festival if you blundered. You lay the feather's leaf under the wire and lift with 2 fingers until the reed tongues whisper harmony. Then you slide the chain under, link by wool-wrapped link, to bear the weight for a breath while you pin the line with a sliver of cedar, trap still there, noise removed, respect paid. You can almost feel Athena approving the craft, if not the tactic. The culvert exhales you into a shadow under a colonnade. Peacocks patrol like over-caffeinated doorbells. But the river has sent you a scent thread, clean water laid over the stones so faintly that even vanity steps around it without knowing why. You follow that thread into a store court where amphorae sleep with their clay mouths corked by wax and string. The key rack on the steward's wall makes you grin. Long, shoulder-length house keys, the kind Greek mistresses carried like badges of office on vases. Their odd size, your quirky tidbit for the night. You don't need one. The door you want has learned to open inward. In the training yard, your earlier curtain of chalk still blunts the echo. Ares bellows. The wall eats half the roar and burps politeness. He frowns, as if his own helmet changed the shape of his skull. You skirt the edge, past racks of spears that glitter in rows like polite teeth. You touch one with the chain, just a tap, and the notion of "not now" glides down the shaft the way oil glides down a hinge. A boy reaches for that spear minutes later and chooses a practice staff instead. No sermon required. A corridor graced with a mosaic of dolphins tries a different trick. The tiles shift their blues just enough to fake depth, a ripple that would make an unwary foot step short. The feather, held low, flutters left, pride again, the artisan's little swagger coded into stone. You breathe a thank you to the unnamed Tyler anyway. Art is still art, and walk the safe line the leaf draws for you. Barefoot quiet in your sandals. Somewhere behind you, a servant carrying figs walks the same line without knowing why his tray didn't become a galaxy of jam. You arrive at a pair of doors that lead not to the great hall. That spectacle can wait, but to a side gallery where laws are copied into fresh wax to carry down the mountain. The archivists you met in the city were right. 2 versions exist here too. The tidy rendition with edges sanded, and the real one scratched first, messy and exact. You set the feather on the table and watch it steady beside the plain text. Measure sits where truth sits, Kratos says, and moves 3 tablets from the later stack to the now basket. It is incredible how often justice is just a matter of order, of what gets read first. Down another hallway, your nose catches a faint sweet laurel. You follow it to a chamber where a priest has left a brazier smoldering. The smoke curls like handwriting, and the reed tongues on your frame tremble in that kindly way they did by the healer's hut. You take a pinch of ash and pocket it. Fires that clear the head keep choosing you as their courier. You pass a niche where a little clay hand, one of those votive shapes people leave for healing, has been set upside down by a bored page. You write it without thinking. The feather thrums once, content, as if decency it itself signed in. Joke 3. Somewhere, a petty god writes, foiled again, in a diary, and underlines it with a peacock quill. The last gate before the inner courts carries a watchword, a synthema, murmured between yawning sentries. They change it at sundown, like good professionals. You don't gamble on getting it right. You walk with the wind at your back and the chalk in your seams. You hold the chain ready to say, later, and you lift the feather when the air feels thick. The gate breathes you through because every hinge here has been taught gently to prefer opening inward today. When you finally look up, you're inside the skin of Olympus, not as a raider, but as a repairman with a pocket full of small tools and a promise to keep. No thunderbolt has cracked a flagstone. No statue weeps blood for spectacle. Yet a dozen little cheats have lost their bite, and a dozen doors have remembered they can be kind. You and Kratos stand in a hush that is not empty, it is readiness. The audience is seated. The orchestra tunes in a key that welcomes human voices. The loud have not noticed that the echo they fed on has gone missing. Next, he says, we talk to them. He does not mean plead. He means show. The feather and the chain answer in their small, exact music. Past the colonnade, a laugh rings a little less sharp. A step falls a little more sure. You feel the mountain tilt, as promised, towards something that finally sounds like balance. You move with Kratos into the inner weather of Olympus, where voices hang like banners, and every corridor thinks it's a stage. The echo has thinned since you chalked the corners and taught hinges new manners. Still, habit lives here with a landlord's swagger. The Titan carries measure and weight the way a doctor carries a bag. No threat, only the promise that someone will listen all the way to the end. Hermes finds you first, obviously. He tumbles out of a sunlit colonnade with a grin honed for mischief and a chain of little bronze rumors rattling behind him like wind chimes that gossip. Delivery, he sings, flourishing a scroll that probably says 6 things to 8 people and the opposite to 3 more. You remember the bells you kissed quiet. He pauses, blinks, feels the absence of his favorite entrance cue, and smiles wider. New game? Kratos nods, as if he's admitting a card up his sleeve is actually a handkerchief. He sets the feather frame between you. A draft slips down the hall. The leaf shivers. The 3 reed tongues disagree. 2 bright, 1 sour. Measure, the Titan murmurs. Hermes squints, amused. I don't lie, he says. I rearrange. The reed tongues answer with the sonic version of a raised eyebrow. You angle the frame toward the message chain, and the bronze links answer with a faint, guilty jingle. Weight glides from your shoulder. 1 open hand link resting across the courier's wrists for a heartbeat, not stopping him, just slowing the flourish to a pace where words have to keep up with their meanings. Hermes tests the pressure and finds no insult there, only a tempo. His feet, winged sandals and all, settle into it. You're making the air honest, he says. A little wonder sneaking through the bravado. That's tacky, he adds, but he's smiling. Kratos lifts the chain and returns the wrists to themselves. The feather steadies. The reed tongues hum into tune. Hermes flips the scroll, reads what he thought it said, then what it actually says, and sighs like a professional, agreeing to use version control. Joke 1. Somewhere an Olympian Slack channel just got turned to slow mode, and Hermes is both annoyed and relieved. You leave him counting to 3 before he speaks, which is either a miracle or therapy. In the training yard, Ares has been coaxing his echo back with sheer volume. Your earlier chalk curtains swallow half his roar. He hears the difference and doesn't like it. Who steals war's song? He barks, which is a very Ares thing to say, as if a tune could be owned because it is loud. You and Kratos step into the ring while spear racks glint like teeth on parade. The Titan doesn't square up. He plants the feather frame on a low stand and waits. Ares circles, restless, suspicion snagging on the calm like a burr. Measure it, Kratos says gently. You tilt the leaf toward the god's chest as he breathes. The tongues clatter. Out of time, out of tune. A storm of drum without any flute under it. Breath before blood, Kratos offers. The kind of instruction a good wrestling coach in any century would give. Ares bristles. Then, because he's not a fool, he tests it. Inhale, count, set the shoulder, set the ground. The reeds lean toward harmony. You lay weight across Ares' spear arm when the rage spikes. Only a palm and a heartbeat, a touch that says later where for centuries he has learned to hear never. The spear tip lowers. The feathers on the leaf quiet. Ares finds, to his own surprise, a small, sharp pleasure in control that doesn't humiliate him. Your mainstream fact for the ring: the Greek hoplite fought in a phalanx whose strength was discipline, shields locked, spears paced, so much so that battles could hinge on which side broke formation first. Historians still argue whether citizen farmer, virtue, or sheer training kept those lines true. But either way, fury served cadence, not the other way around. The feather shows Ares the same truth with modern bedside manners. A boy from the armory watches, eyes round. He's the one who picked a practice staff when your chain tapped a spear earlier. Ares notices, grunts, and corrects the boy's stance without shouting. It looks like pride. Remembering it can be a tutor instead of a tantrum. Joke 2. Olympus HR will have to rename mandatory raging to optional rousing. Athena stands in the shade of an olive carved so cleverly into the frieze that it casts real-looking leaves on the floor. She has seen everything already. Of course she has. She taps a tablet with a stylus. Lips a tight line. Not anger. Not yet. The expression of someone whose elegant plan has picked up a few barnacles called reality. You remember the archivist's plain copies, the order you swapped, measure steadying by the honest draft. Kratos bows, the bow of a craftsman to another. Your webs are beautiful, he says. Some are also nets. She considers. Nets catch dinner, she says. Nets catch friends. If you forget to hang a door, you set the feather on the tablet. Its leaf trembles, not from pride, but from friction. The tiny vibration that comes when a strategy has too many self-congratulations stitched into the seam. Athena frowns at the sound, the way a mathematician frowns at an equation that balances a bit too prettily. Kratos slides the chain, weight, across the top of the tablet, holding back one decorative clause that would have turned counsel into performance. She inhales. The reeds hum closer to true. You aren't breaking my plan, she says. You are untying the ribbon. It is not an apology. It is better, a revision. She sketches a new line. that puts the plain text laws in front of the tidy ones, moves a meeting to when people are fed, adds a chair for the quiet smith with the spark constellation shoulders. You can see the plan breathe, as if she let out a seam. You offer a little fact to the shade. In classical Athens, the Areopagus, rocky hill, older council, judged homicide cases with rules that prized hearing and restraint. The name still clings to the place. Athena nods once toward that hill in your sentence, as if to say, yes, we've known how to slow the loud before. Your quirky tidbit sneaks in from the porch where athletes oil themselves. A pair of strigils hangs on a peg. Curved scrapers used to clean sweat and dust after training. The jar of olive oil beside them smells green and warm. You think of how the old gymnasium mixed mind and body, and how those tools say, first scrape, then shine. The feather's leaf lifts as if agreeing. Historians still argue whether the famous linothorax, linen armor, was glued in layers, quilted, or a bit of both. Either way, many good protections aren't hard. They're woven. Athena smiles the thin smile of a teacher, happy someone did the reading. Zephyrus slips down the passage like a baker's sigh, and the peacocks, those jeweled alarms, pretend not to be offended. Hermes wanders back, now reading aloud his own message to hear where it loops. Ares tests a calm draw and finds it lands harder. Athena edits without mercy for her own vanity. It feels, for a breath, like a good city on a good day, not a soap opera disguised as a sky. You keep walking the galleries where lesser habits live. A bronze gong, wired to sing at every compliment, has been rerouted, so it only rings when someone brings bread. The mosaic of dolphins that try to trick your stride gets a border of rougher tesserae, so elderly sandals don't slip. Your little ash bag proves handy again. A hallway of victory shields, trophies polished harsh as noon, loses its echo when you hang 3 simple wool banners from the rafters. No one misses the ringing until someone notices their shoulders don't climb toward their ears anymore. You find Hera watching from a balcony, gaze like a spindle, steady, pointed. She has always loved the ceremony of order and the theater of household power. You bow like a competent steward. Doors that open inward make households kinder, you say. She doesn't answer, but later you see a servant carry a sleeping child through a doorway without bumping a shin scrape of bronze. Sometimes approval is the absence of correction. Everywhere you hold the feather to claims. This decree is necessary. This laugh is harmless. This rule keeps people safe. And you watch the leaf tell the truth. Sometimes it says yes. Sometimes the reed tongues whine like wasps, and you move the later clause to never. Hermes swaps a rumor for a clarification with only one pun. Ares teaches 3 boys to breathe before they swing. Athena erases a flourish and writes a working hinge. The cat, who has promoted itself to quality control lead, approves by sleeping on whichever document needs weight. A mainstream fact taps your shoulder as you pass a court where shards of pottery have been swept into a basket. In Athens, citizens sometimes scratched a name on an ostracon to banish a would-be tyrant for 10 years. Ostracism, exile by shard. Historians still argue whether it saved the city or simply sidelined rivals. But the custom admits a permanent truth. Sometimes you need a cooler, not a hero. Your feather is a cooler. Your chain, too. 3 jokes worth of mischief nearly bloom when Hermes tries to race the feather by speaking truths so fast they turn to lies by tripping over one another. He laughs when the reeds scold him. The sound is clean, like a bell with no string tied to it. Joke 3, Olympus will need a suggestion box, and the first card will read, more bread, fewer speeches, keep the cats. By the time the lamps are lit, the mountain's conversation has changed timbre. It hasn't gone mute. It has shed the feedback loop that let every shout become 6 shouts, and every plan wear a cape. You feel the echo starving, and the loud, baffled at first, begin to hear themselves the way mortals always have to. That's the gentle unmaking. You don't smash their instruments. You remove the festival tent that turned their tuning into thunder. You step with Kratos into the bright hall that always opens outward, and for the first time in its long echo-loving life, the door sighs inward and shuts like a thoughtful mouth. The pillars glow as if they remember every toast ever lifted here. Zeus stands with a thunderbolt tilted in his hand like a maestro's baton, his brow already writing the weather on everyone else's day. He tastes the air, less echo than usual, and frowns. You feel the room test its own acoustics, the way a singer hums before a note. The hum comes back smaller. Good. Kratos does not kneel. He holds up measure, the cedar frame with its leaf of hammered light, and the leaf quivers. 3 reed tongues answer, 2 bright, 1 sour, the way pride always pushes slightly sharp. If your voice is music, the Titan says, slow as a tide, let us tune the hall. You set weight across the threshold, 1 open hand link touching bronze, so no rush can crowd the room. The chain doesn't bind, it simply refuses stampedes. Somewhere behind a screen, a peacock reconsiders its life choices and tiptoes. Zeus smiles the smile of a storm convinced of its own scenery. A toy? He asks, regarding the feather. A trinket? The reed tongues flick into minor key, unimpressed. You could swear Apollo, standing near with a lyre that has never known a wrong note, tilts his head as if to admit that sometimes a new instrument deserves a listen. Kratos turns the frame toward the king's chest. The leaf chatters. Breath, he says evenly, then bolt. A glare like noon on snow hits the room as Zeus snaps the air. Lightning does what lightning does. It takes the shortest path to ground. But today, the shortest path winds through a hall whose corners no longer stack applause into avalanches. The blast staggers, startled to be alone in its own skin. It hammers the floor, scorches a careful circle, and sulks like a diva denied reverb. Joke 1. Somewhere in the rafters, echo files for independent contractor status. Kratos steps forward, and weight rises, not to restrain the arm, not to humiliate the hand, but to touch the wrist for 1 heartbeat, the exact space between sense and spectacle, the chain says later, and the thunder that was loading for round 2 flickers and sits down inside itself, like a cat reconsidering a leap. The reed tongues stop arguing. The leaf steadies. Your thunder is still thunder, Kratos says quietly. It simply no longer borrows 12 other throats. Apollo plucks a single clean note, testing the new air, and grins despite himself when it rings true. Hermes, who has learned to count to 3 before speaking, counts to 4 just to show off, and then bows, as if this were all an elaborate prank he secretly approves. Ares, breathing like a trained line of shields, leans his spear against the wall without denting the marble. Athena, stylus poised, makes a small correction to a sentence so it reads like law instead of applause. You add a fact to the table like bread. Zeus's greatest statue, the Chryselephantine Wonder by Phidias at Olympia, gold and ivory gleaming, once sat not on this mount, but far to the west, at a sanctuary of running and wrestling and oaths. It was counted among the 7 wonders. Historians still argue whether that statue later moved to Constantinople and perished in a fire or vanished earlier by slower, quieter neglect. Either way, here is the straight thing under the glitter. Power that needs a bigger room every year is already afraid of its own sound. Zeus lifts his chin. You were erased, he says, as if announcing weather observations absolves the storm. Songs prefer clarity. Kratos nods toward the muses, who linger like a chord unsure of its cadence. Songs prefer truth, he answers. Truth prefers pauses. You turn the feather toward the sisters. Their work has always been honest. Their edits lately were tidy to the point of thinness. The leaf flutters, then settles, when one, Calliope maybe, lets an extra beat back into her line. The reed tongues hum in relief. Joke too. Somewhere, a metronome relaxes, the way shoulders do when a chair finally fits. You open the doors a hand's width, still inward, and Iris sweeps a color path from the world below. Not a spectacle, just a window. The hall fills with small pictures. A baker setting an extra loaf on the sill. A midwife keeping panic out of a room. The old man's water clock running even. The goat union nodding approval to a new reed song. The cat asleep on the plane. Text tablet, so it gets read first. A boy choosing the practice staff. A watchman tapping twice, then once to change a route. A river writing arrows and twigs. Owls mapping winds. Smiths lifting metal that sings. None of them ask for thrones. All of them hold the roof up. Zeus watches. Without the echo, watching is quieter work. He tries another bolt, cleaner this time. Breath before flare. It cracks like honest wood, not fireworks. The room does not flatter it into legend. The feather leaf rests at last. And for the first time since you stepped inside, the king of weather hears his own weight, without applause. They erased you, he repeats, but softer now, like a man who has been handed a mirror that does not bend. Kratos answers by not taking. He doesn't seize the throne. He doesn't swap crowns. He sets measure on the table and weight beside it. These remain here, he says. Anyone may use them. Athena reaches first, of course. She places the chain across the top of a decree and moves 3 clauses from urgent to later, where they can do less harm. Ares touches the feather with 2 fingers and breathes until the reeds hum close to his pulse. Hermes raises a hand like a student and asks, not announces, if he may lend the feather to the courier's room, so old women with letters can tell when help is truly promised. The muses carefully return 2 erased names to songs and restore a pause that lets the chorus weep without shame. You set one more truth by the bread and olives, the Olympic Games, born not on this mountain, but at Olympia in 726 BCE by the old counting, honored Zeus with running and wrestling. Yes, but the winning was rhythm, training, and shared rules, not thunder at the finish line. Historians still argue whether the truce that paused wars for those games was widely obeyed or mostly aspirational PR. Even if half kept it, the point stands. Sometimes the best power is agreed. Pause. Zeus walks down from where the dais begins. He is still tall. He is still weather. But the amplifier is gone. And without it, he is simply loud inside a room that has learned to breathe again. He looks at the chain and the feather, at your chalk-dusted seams, and the laurel smoke that keeps choosing your cloak, at a child in the world below being tucked through a doorway that opens inward. Who rules? He asks with the tone of a man who already knows the answer and is making sure he heard it right. No one, Kratos says, or everyone, when they can hear. You think of thunderstones. Old villagers once kept flint axes or belemnite fossils as charms against lightning, calling them Zeus cast-off bolts. Quirky as it sounds, the practice admits something perfect. Even fallen thunder can protect if you use it as a weight to hold the roof steady. Joke 3. Olympus will start labeling drawers. Echo, pride, bread, and discover the lost one, called later, works better than never. Zeus lifts his hand, empty of bolt now, and for a long breath the hall does nothing but be a hall. Apollo plays a short phrase that serves the room instead of his legend. Athena writes a hinge into law. Ares corrects a boy's stance without roaring. Hermes takes a deep breath and says one true thing all the way through without ornament, and the floor does not collapse. The peacock blinks, finds no cue, and decides to be a bird. Kratos turns, not triumphant, just finished with a particular kind of work. He does not sit. He starts down. You follow, carrying measure until it belongs to the table more than to you, carrying weight until the door remembers inward as easily as outward. The mountain you leave behind has the same number of gods, but fewer excuses. The valley you return to has the same number of people, but more room to breathe. You pass the old man with the clock, the baker with the extra loaf, the cat with the promotion, the goats with their reed music contract. Everyone's job remains. Only the echo lost its post. At the ridge, night leans in with the gentleness it saves for people who finished what they said they would. The wind names itself Zephyrus and brings you the smell of bread, of laurel, of honest metal. Kratos looks at the sky without malice. I told you, he says, meaning the oath, meaning the plan, meaning the patient revenge that undid thunder without breaking the weather. No throne. The stars do what they have always done. Show up, not shout. The world hums back into tune.